Do you guys remember a time where I used to be a strictly DVD and VHS channel? Those were the days, man, those were the days. And despite the fact that I now don't even have any of my Thomas stuff on display anymore, every now and again I'll give Thomas the Tank Engine a little search on eBay just to see if some middle-aged woman has listed a G-scale Bachmann Thomas on eBay for 20 quid.
And I did it because I liked it, and I loved it!
Anyway, point is, my desire to have certain Thomas items has never truly gone away, and the items that I like to try and track down are pretty frequently in the rare category. Do I need this new unboxed take-along lights and sounds Thomas? No, but the packaging looks cool, so I need it. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the rarest Thomas items on the market, and at the end, I'm going to deduce which item I would want the most. So before we get into the really obscure ones, I think it's only necessary to briefly go over the items that you would expect to see here. The first and most prominent rare item that I'm sure a lot of you already know is the Wooden Railway Whiteface Troublesome Truck. According to the creator of Thomas Wooden Railway, Roy Wilson, this variant of an already existing item was never actually supposed to be released. Only a few thousand of these guys were actually released back in 1993 around New York and England. Considering how frequent it is and was for parents to throw away their kids' toys when they got older, a good percentage of these guys are unfortunately lost to time. A fair few Whitefaces have appeared online over the years, and despite them being the most notorious rare item, I wouldn't actually say it's the rarest, far from it in fact. Another item which has gotten a lot of attention in recent years has been the original two Guillotine videotapes from Season 1. These two tapes were the first time that Thomas had ever been released on VHS back in 1985. I'm not going to go into specifics here because I've made an entire video about them, but long story short, they are in extremely high demand by the collecting community, and considering that only around 12 or so copies of Further Adventures have ever been claimed, it's highly unlikely that there's going to be any more than 20 found, full stop. Alrighty, those are the ones that I'm sure you all expected to be on here. Now let's move on to the more juicy ones, starting with...
It's a lovely day and Thomas is busy as ever, but who...
What is wrong with you? Why are you...
For the better part of 30 years, Hornby was the UK's main source of HM models for Thomas, with the range consisting of around 20 or so characters. Say what you want about these guys from a visual standpoint, but they were some quality products. While Hornby started off very strong and stayed so for a good few years, their releases for brand new characters like Stepney, Oliver and D261 were limited to pretty low quantities in comparison to the main characters. To add on top of this, Hornby Thomas models weren't necessarily the easiest things to get your hands on. Even if you did live in the UK, these items weren't typically sold in your local toy shops, and if you wanted to pick up any of them, you'd have to go into some kind of hobby shop or a store that specialises in model trains. All of this accumulated into the models becoming extremely hard to get your hands on, and that's not even the worst of it. The main thing that plagued these items for the longest time, and still does to this day, is how high in demand they are. These models are without a shadow of a doubt Hornby's best work for Thomas, and unlike a lot of their other models, they look exactly like they do in the TV series. Not only this, but the Hornby models for the newer characters are the only way you can get those characters in HO, bar Oliver of course. Bachmann has only released one of Hornby's more obscure characters, that once again being Oliver, but when it comes to Stepney, Dart, Flying Scotsman and especially Murdoch, we've gotten nothing since. It's because of all of these aspects that the models can now go for extortionate prices on the resale market, with Murdoch going for upwards of £1,500. Let's talk about home media for a quick second. I'm not going to cover every rare Thomas VHS and DVD because we will be here until the end of time, but I'm going to go over the most notable ones. In my opinion, one of the most interesting genre of Thomas DVDs is promotional copies. For those who aren't particularly clued up on what promotional DVDs are, promotional DVDs were typically given out in things like play sets, events, and in the UK's case, newspapers. These DVDs would usually feature around 1 or 2 episodes and would be encased inside of a cardboard sleeve. Now the kicker with these guys is that naturally they would be typically only sold for around 1 week at a time, so the window of getting these guys was extremely small. I wouldn't necessarily say that these are in high demand, but considering that they were likely produced in extremely low quantities and 80% of people who got them probably threw them in the bin, it's safe to say that they are a very tricky bunch to get your hands on. Something I've always found really funny about some of them is the completely bonkers episode pairings. You've got Edward Trevor and the Really Useful Party paired with Thomas and the Rumours, Thomas Saves the Day and James and the Express, and there's my personal favourite, Sticky Toffee Thomas and Busy Going Backwards?
What?
I don't know who thought those episodes correlated in any way, but they were obviously having fun. The promotional DVD that has the most notability to it though is a DVD called Making Tracks with Thomas and Friends. This DVD featured the remaining 2 pack episodes that were for some reason never included on the original DVD release of Thomas's Trusty Friends. The Daily Mirror reissue of this DVD, simply called 2 Fantastic Episodes, isn't too rare, but the original Woolworths release of this from 2006 has never actually showed up online in the last 6 years. And of course you have the behemoth of rare Thomas tapes, 3 splendid episodes. A release that was only available to people who collected Thomas tokens and were part of the Thomas Club in the UK. I don't even know how many of these were even produced. Were they made to order? Were there only a select few made because the distributors didn't believe that there would be that many people that would want to claim the tapes? We'll never know. What I do know though is that it goes for an absolutely disgracefully high amount on the resale market. The US also had a couple of promotional releases that are worth noting. The 3 Blockbuster exclusive tapes, Thomas's Magical Musical Ride, Thomas's Fan Favourite Adventures, Thomas's Useful Stories, and the DVD Great Destinations, are pretty sought after on the secondary market, and much like the Daily Mirror and Daily Record DVDs, these would have been sold in pretty low quantities. Something I do wonder though is, were these tapes ever available to purchase? Or were they only available for renting like all of the other tapes at Blockbuster? Let me know in the comments what you think. Now, while yes, the promotional DVDs are rare, there's also some Thomas tapes and DVDs that are just straight up hard to find nowadays, especially for a good price, so let's go through them rapid fire. Tales from the Tracks. It was the last US Thomas VHS released in the year 2006, so now it goes for far too much. Ghost Train and Other Stories. I honestly don't know why this one is so rare because the rest of the season 2 re-releases are pretty common. Either way, it now goes for upwards of £100. Down the Mine and Other Stories. It was a VHS released in low quantities with a cardboard case that's bound to deteriorate over time. What do you expect? Troublesome Trucks and Other Stories. The Sad Story of Henry and Other Stories. Thomas Comes to Breakfast and Other Stories. Basically all of the Australian promotional releases. The Best Kept, Station Competition, and Surprise Adventures cassettes. And many, many, many more. And before we move on to the next section, let me briefly talk to you about a little release called Happy Holidays. No, not the UK VHS, I'm talking about the Australian DVD. So, long story short, this DVD was advertised as having 3 songs to sing along to. It was advertised on the front cover and everything. And yet on the actual DVD, the songs simply weren't there. And so almost instantly the DVD was recalled and now only 1 copy has ever been claimed. And fun fact about that, I've actually held the copy before in my hands, which is really, really cool. Okay, so this was where Jay's part in the video was meant to be, but they lost their phone with all the footage on it and stuff, so yeah, there's going to be no take-along stuff in this video. But I might just make a part 2. Alright, you know what, screw any previous structure this video had, I'm just going to go through some rare items right now. When looking at items that were exclusive to different countries, I think it's a bit of a grey area as to whether or not you can even call them rare. Because while yes, to you they might be rare, they're probably pretty common in their country of origin. This is where ranges like Nakayoshi, Bandai Departing Now, and Playrail come into the picture. Even though for the most part these items are considered to be common in their country of origin, there are still some instances where the items are considered to be rare even in their country of origin. Bandai Diesel 10 is a great example. This item was undeniably mass released. However, due to the nature of the item and how phenomenal it is, a lot of people are going to want it, including myself. However, when you look on eBay for it, it goes for a lot. The same can be said for things like Departing Now Edward, which was released in a pretty small time window, and some of the older models of Nakayoshi due to the fact that they were never meant to last, and so a good 70% of the listings of them have many pieces missing and the stickers have been peeled off. It's because of this that finding Nakayoshi engines in good condition, let alone brand new, is a very tough task. Let's move on to the Trackmaster Jack in the Pack models. Unlike their take-along counterparts, these guys were released in a completely random fashion, with Monty being exclusive to Poland, allegedly, and Alfie being exclusive to Canada, apparently, and the rest of the models being sold wherever the stores could be bothered to stock them. I myself don't ever recall them being on UK store shelves, so either I wasn't looking hard enough, or they were released in very small quantities. I'm gonna go with the latter. On the topic of Trackmaster, let's go over some models that are on the extensively rare side. The first one is an item that I have always wanted to get, and that is the Playrail Angry / Powerful Gordon. There is little to no information about this guy on the internet, but from what I can deduce, this variant of the regular 2003 Playrail Gordon was released for a short amount of time around the mid-2000s. Unlike a lot of other rare items that we've covered, this item was actually mass produced during its release period, which makes sense considering that there's always at least 1 or 2 on eBay at a time. It doesn't change the fact that this item is an extremely sought after model, due to its scarily accurate angry expression. And on the topic of expressions, let's look at the flip face engines. First debuting in the Thomas Optimus Shed set in 2008, the flip face Trackmaster engines are my personal favourite type of model. They're definitely a little goofy looking, but to me, I think they have the most charm out of any Thomas product out there. Over the course of a few years, Trackmaster released the following engines in the flip face form: Thomas, James, Hero, a planned release for Gordon and Percy, and my personal favourite, Toby. Toby was released in the copper mindset and came with a happy expression and a shocked expression. I think you can imagine why this item is so rare. Not only was it sold for a limited time, it's also an utterly fantastic model, and is unanimously agreed to be the definitive motorized Toby. Toby isn't the only rare one though. Basically all of the flip face engines go for a pretty penny on the resale market due to their extensive detail, cool novelty, and they're just generally really good models. Another motorized item that I feel deserves a mention is the Chinese Dragon Tommy Thomas, a model that has fascinated me ever since I saw it appear in one of Leo's videos. This specific variant of Thomas has painted eyes and a matte finish on the face, which in my opinion looks far better than the original one. This model was only sold in one set called Thomas and the Chinese Dragon, which also came with a promotional DVD of the same name, which of course featured the episode Thomas Percy and the Dragon. The only way you'd probably be able to get this guy nowadays is by buying the set brand new in box, or getting extremely lucky and finding him in a bundle like Leo did. Now let's look at some more recent Thomas items that are now hard to find. In a reply to my tweet asking for suggestions on the rare items, Portable Thomas replied with a photo of the Trackmaster Pushalong Emily with the number 12 that she gained in season 24. Considering essentially none of the new characters from season 24 got Pushalong models, I think it's safe to assume that this model of Emily was one of the last models that was produced for the CGI series brand of Pushalong. Now at first, I'll be honest, I thought he was over exaggerating a little bit, but upon looking through countless eBay and Facebook listings, I couldn't find a single one with the number 12. It's so fascinating to me that an item that was only released 4 years ago can be so difficult to track down. My guess is that this particular variant was only released for a very short period of time, and due to Trackmaster Pushalong not selling very well in the first place, at least from what I could tell, it didn't sell very well and so very few are in circulation. The next more recent item that we're going to look at is the Trackmaster Thomas's Christmas train from 2021. Initially, I couldn't find a single piece of information about this thing, and I just assumed that it was cancelled. However, after doing some digging, I found a Facebook post from Totally Thomas, in which they state that the only stock of this item that was in the UK was one small batch order that was sent directly to Totally Thomas, and it very quickly sold out. I'm not sure if it was ever released in the US because while yes there is a listing of it on the Walmart website, it's hard to say whether or not they even got any of them in. Let's move on to books for a moment. While a good majority of Thomas books aren't worth anything, there's a selection of books from the Railway series that has accumulated a pretty big buyer base in recent years, that being the Christopher Audrey run of the Railway series books. The remaining 16 books that Chris wrote for the Railway series are for some reason not readily available in the same way that Wilbert's are. Say what you want about the quality of the writing in those books, but they deserve to be seen just as much as Wilbert's do. The main detriment when it came to the availability of Christopher's books is the fact that the distributor of the books, being Egmont, put out the books in extremely low numbers. It's also worth considering the fact that the fandom was nowhere near as big as it is now back then, and so general consumers probably wouldn't be as inclined to pick up the more recent editions of a book series that they read as a kid when compared to say a golden book of Day of the Diesels. This didn't only affect the regular releases of the books, but it also affected the compilation release called The New Collection, which obviously didn't sell very well and so now it goes for hundreds of pounds. And I haven't even mentioned some of the last books yet. The final book in the Railway series, being called Thomas and His Friends, only pops up on eBay once every 6 months or so, and when it does, it can fetch upwards of £500. I'm almost certain that Mattel has the resources to re-release these books in their own collection like they did with Wilbert's books back in 2020, but they're just simply choosing not to. Here's to hoping they release the full 42 book collection for the 80th anniversary in 2025. And I think that about covers it. I think out of all the items we've covered, the item that I would love to get my hands on the most is Bandai Diesel 10. This guy is literally a perfect translation of his model and captures the goofy yet intimidating nature of Neil Crow's portrayal of the character. If any of you guys have like a spare one or like just want to give me one for free, then I'm right here.